This is Marketplace. Let's talk about filthy flights. More people, more flights, less time to clean. We reveal the dirtiest surface.
It feels really, really gross.
Don't check in without your Marketplace. Our bags are packed and we're on our way.
Okay, guys, you ready to hit the air? Let's do this.
We're going on 18 flights.
Safe travels. Thanks, you too.
We're taking you up, way up, to find out what's really going down when it comes to cleanliness.
Where are you coming from?
Vancouver.
From Regina.
I'm coming from Paris.
How clean do you think your plane was?
Well, let's put it this way. I used antibiotic wet wipes to wipe everything down before we took off.
When you do fly, do you ever think about how clean your airplane is?
Yeah, a lot actually.
All the time. Really? Yeah, sometimes I reach down into the pocket and I find crumbs. I'm like, oh God.
That's why we're testing 3 popular airlines: Air Canada, WestJet, and Porter.
Good morning. First flight of the day. We're rolling.
Taking short-haul flights to nearby cities: Ottawa,
It's high color.
and Montreal.
We made it.
And swabbing all the popular plane spots along the way to reveal the dirtiest surface. We're also checking in on the air, wearing a face mask to see how much bacteria is on board. Starting with Air Canada.
Here we go.
It doesn't take long for us to find some surfaces that don't look so spotless.
Those are crumbs. It also has some artwork on it. This doesn't look like Grand X, looks like dirt.
Next up, WestJet.
First one.
Already brown.
On one of our WestJet flights, we meet the pilot.
We're clear for takeoff.
While I fake my flying skills, my team swabs some Porter planes. And not all the samples look so pretty here either. On each flight, we've swabbed the seat belt, tray table, headrest, seat pocket, washroom handle, and sampled the air, too.
Computers must be safely stowed. Portable electronic devices should be set to airplane mode at this time. Thank you.
3 airlines, 18 flights. In total, over 100 samples collected. We're taking them to microbiologist Keith Warner at the University of Guelph.
So when we go on an airline, we definitely make ourselves more susceptible, not only because there's lack of humidity or lack of oxygen, so we're more prone to it, and we can get a whole range of different bugs.
He's testing for all kinds of bacteria, yeast, and mold.
What are the dangers if we find yeast or mold on a surface or even in the air?
So yeast and molds in the air are the most dangerous because we breathe them in, they get to our lungs, they'll start growing in our lungs, causing kinds of infections.
He's also looking for pathogens.
Now, another one we're looking for is something called E. coli. Now, this indicates fecal contamination.
Fecal?
So fecal contamination, which nobody would expect on a plane, but
No.
You'll be surprised how far it gets.
Nothing would surprise this trio. Stefan, Christina, and Connor used to work for the big airlines. They say keeping the planes clean was part of their job, but not a priority.
We didn't have much training when it came to grooming the aircraft. Our safety training was predominantly on taking care of the passengers.
How big of a priority was cleaning?
You know, it definitely was not a huge priority, and when it was a priority, it wasn't necessarily for a cleanliness, it was for an aesthetic purpose. It was just to kind of give a nice little facelift.
A facelift?
Facelift.
So a surface cleaning?
Yes.
As a former WestJet flight attendant, Stefan says there just wasn't enough time.
When passenger goes off and they deplane the aircraft, you have like a 5 to maybe 10 minutes to clean the aircraft.
Whoa, just 5 to 10 minutes to clean the plane?
So from removing stuff from the seat pocket to cleaning dirty diapers on the floor or glasses on the floor and cleaning the washroom and emptying like the garbage, and then you had to reboard passenger and leave. So we had no time to like wash the table or very clean everything perfectly.
Given their experience, what surface do they think will be the dirtiest?
I'll say the seat belt.
I say the washroom door handle.
I'm gonna say tray table.
Back in Guelph, the results are in.
Keith, over 100 samples, 18 flights. What have we got here?
Well, I was really amazed about how much we actually recovered from them. Some are more scary than others.
Coming in at number 5, the seatbelts.
What did you find when it came to the seatbelts?
These are nice moles here, but what it really illustrates, again, is probably those seatbelts haven't been washed for some time. So it wasn't so much finding moles, it's just the levels we found them at.
Number 4 on our list of germiest spots.
Lots of people use the tray table on their flight. So what did you find when it came to the tray tables?
This is a yeast and moles, and these are the yellow moles here. So moles fairly predominant, and I guess that's another sign that they haven't really been sanitized adequately.
So mold on tray tables where people are eating.
That's true, but that's the least of it. So that's the good news. The bad news is this is what we call blood agar, and this grows up pathogens and hemolytic bacteria, and we can see some hemolytic bacteria here. So those white ones could be streptococcus.
Okay.
So you know that sort of bug that gives you sore throat sometimes and things like that.
Former Porter employee Connor is not surprised.
People look at a tray table as something that we eat and drink off of on our flight from one destination to another, and a brand new mom is looking at it as a changing table. It's whatever is easiest and convenient when you're thousands of feet up in the air.
Time to share our results with travelers.
Whoa! What is that called?
This is staph.
Oh. Look at your eyes. Whoa!
And you know where we found that? On a tray table.
Oh my goodness.
How have I not gotten sick?
This is staph.
Okay.
Found that on a tray table.
Sick. Well, I won't be sleeping on those anymore.
To get a reality check, meet Jason Tetro, microbiologist and germ expert.
Oh, wow.
That is staph.
Yeah, that to me suggests that maybe that tray table probably could have used a cleaning.
Jason says if you're a healthy traveler, the risk is low. Finding pathogens on a plane, though, that's a problem.
You've compared airlines to ER waiting rooms.
Right.
Give me that explanation, please.
So, if you walk into an emergency room, you're in a very small, confined space, all right, with a number of people you don't know.
Right.
And you're going to be forced to sit down beside 1, 2, 6 people you don't know and potentially could be sick.
Back at the lab, it's time for more results. Number 3, the washroom handle.
I know washrooms are maybe always not the cleanest place, but what did you find when it came to the washroom handles?
So this is where the real nightmare started, because, as you rightly said, we expect washrooms to be fairly contaminated after all. But what's surprising is the number of E. coli positive samples.
E. coli positive.
Yeah, so E. coli, the fecal indicator. So what we found is fairly high frequency of these pathogen indicators and also numbers. So it was, as they say, the germ hotspot on the airline itself or airplane.
Washrooms might be the germ hotspot, but that's not the runner-up for dirtiest surface on a plane. That's the seat pocket.
I think what was more interesting than just finding high bacterial counts, we also found E. coli there. So we've got to try and think, how would fecal contamination get inside?
Our insiders dish the dirty truth.
Diapers.
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 Yeah, everything goes in there. Everything from the paper-thin vomit bags to used wrappers to, I don't want to gross people out at home, but I was saying I found used tampons in seat pockets before.
Sorry, used tampons?
Used tampons.
And you said
Condoms.
in the seat pocket?
Yeah, in the seat pocket.
What do you think the dirtiest surface was?
Oh, don't tell me.
Blow my mind.
And what's in the air?
I always say that diseases are one aircraft away.
Filthy Flights continues. Get more Marketplace. Sign up for our weekly newsletter at cbc.ca/marketplace. This is your Marketplace. We're investigating how filthy flights really are. Our results show pathogens and bacteria that could make you sick. Now, we're about to reveal the dirtiest surface of all.
Dirtiest surface, what do you think?
Seatbelt. Yeah, because I mean, everybody touches that.
Tray table.
I think it would be the washroom.
Do you know what the dirtiest surface was?
Okay, blow my mind.
So, Keith, what was the filthiest surface?
So the filthiest surface in terms of total counts was the headrest.
Really?
Yup, the headrest is the dirtiest surface.
How dirty were the headrests?
So we're surprised at the level of contamination in terms of the actual counts, but also we found E. coli, hemolytic staphylococcus.
On a headrest?
Yeah, on a simple headrest, and you would think, well, it's in the head, it's not going to do anything. But in actual fact, it can give you conditions such as dermatitis, and it can give you dandruff, and that's not even thinking about lice and other things like that.
So, would you be surprised if I told you it was actually the headrest?
Oh, I didn't even think about that. Wow. Well, I'm going to have to take a shower when I get home then.
Even germ expert Jason Tetro is surprised.
The headrest was our most contaminated surface.
I was shocked. Honestly, I travel so much on planes, and even I, the germ guy, went, ew.
Yeah.
And the reason is not because of the numbers. I'm always going to expect to see a lot of numbers.
Okay.
But it was the yeast and the mold and how the headrest is such an important part of our trip.
Every airline that we tested, we did see examples of yeast and mold.
Yeah.
Give me some insight. What's your take on that?
It is troubling when you see it on something like a headrest. It isn't so troubling when you see it everywhere else. What you hopefully are not going to have a problem with is coming into contact with that yeast and that mold in areas where it could potentially cause infection, like your head. And unfortunately, as we saw in this study, there were quite a few yeast and mold on the headrests.
Right.
Time to go beyond the surface now and check out air quality. Remember, our team wore medical masks on board 18 flights for 30 minutes each. To test the difference, we wore masks in the office too. Turns out, nothing to worry about in our office samples. But wait until you hear what shows up on the planes.
Let's talk about the air. Our team wore those masks, we brought them in, and I am very interested to see what you found floating around in those planes.
Well, we found a hemolytic one. That's the most serious, because when you breathe it in, that's where they start colonizing the lungs and get straight into the blood system.
So how worried should people be about the air that they're breathing in when they're flying?
Well, the air is very significant. Simple fact, we blow it into our lungs, and that's where things can get hold. And so We have to try and protect ourselves somehow because it's obvious the plane system, what they've got in there at the moment, or certain planes, isn't efficient at removing that contamination from the air.
Time to clear the air with travelers.
We also tested the air, found yeast and mold. So you can be breathing that stuff in.
That doesn't surprise me. No wonder people are sick when they get off of there. Or days later.
It feels really, really gross. Like, I think you almost just kind of accept the conditions for what they are, but you definitely want it to be cleaner.
What do you think about that?
Not good.
Not good.
But Tetro says the pathogens aren't the concern. It's the cramped environment.
So the air itself is not really the issue. It's the fact that when you are in there, in that tube, with all these people who are shedding, that there's going to be a contaminated air source.
Right. So we found the hemolytic bacteria, we found yeast and mold. As people who have been on airplanes a lot, what's going through your mind, Connor?
You know, I always assumed that the air quality was going to be poor. Flying, you're in a tube high in the air with so many people.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. I was getting lots of cold, sinus infection, bronchitis. I was always sick.
Anytime, you know, any kind of contained environment where you have lots and lots of people, there's bound to be germs circulating. I always say that diseases are one aircraft away.
Our test isn't over yet. Just wait until you see what you could be cuddling up to.
Ew.
I wonder how many flights this poor blanket has had.
Got a story you want us to investigate? Write to us, marketplace@cbc.ca. This is your marketplace. 3 airlines, 18 flights, over 100 samples tested. We found everything from staph, yeast, and mold, even E. coli on plane surfaces. Our final test, those blankets.
Blankets. We picked up a few. What did you find with those?
Well, 2 stories, 1 blanket, not even a stain.
That's good news.
A small win for Air Canada. But the WestJet blanket?
Now, the other blanket, though, was a bit more worrying. We found moles there and a high total count.
Wow.
And what was worrying is this was in a cellophane wrapper.
Packaged as new, but the results reveal a different story.
Okay, hit the lights. I'm nervous.
When we check it out under a black light,
Yeah, you see that? So you can see it's almost like an imprint, isn't it? Something.
Oh my gosh.
Oh yeah, maybe the outline of it.
It looks like a smear.
Yeah.
Ooh, ooh.
But you wouldn't expect this from a
sealed blanket.
A sealed blanket.
Oh my gosh.
I wonder how many flights this whole blanket has had, isn't it?
Our industry insiders aren't surprised. They say reusing products on a plane, more common than you'd think.
What do you guys do with the pillows? Do those ever get cleaned?
We just put them back in the overhead bin.
Back in the overhead bin?
Back in the overhead bin.
Blankets going down south, coming back on the same day with the same blankets, and on their way back, new passenger were using other passenger blankets or pillows.
Not washing them at all?
No, because
Same
you have no
blanket.
grooming there.
It's a matter of reusing products to save costs. It's
reusing them.
Yeah.
And as for that blanket we tested, WestJet says it's investigating because they say all the blankets sold on their flights are new and not previously used.
One of them that was sealed in plastic, again, bacteria, yeast, mold, and we looked at it under a black light, smears all over it.
One would assume that if it were sealed that they had cleaned it, but obviously not.
Oh, that's sad. See, if they're sealed, they should be like steamed and
Clean.
germ-free.
And you might be wondering about Porter's blankets. Well, we couldn't test them because they don't have any.
What do you think airlines could be doing?
Well, after every flight, they really should have someone going in there and disinfecting everything. Yeah. Not just the things you see.
We ask all 3 airlines to come on camera. They decline. All of them tell us they follow Canadian and international grooming rules. Air Canada also sent us a study funded in part by Boeing, you know, the world's largest airplane manufacturer. A study they say proves, yes, airplanes are dirty, but no more dirty than any other public space. WestJet says they're concerned, but they tell us they do their best, given that planes are public spaces, and add they clean their planes daily. And Porter says they're confident about their efforts to keep you and their staff safe.
But these insiders say, keep yourself safe.
I always recommend that passengers take matters into their own hands and responsibility and protect themselves when traveling domestically, internationally. So when I board the aircraft, I bring antibacterial wipes. I wipe down the screen. I wipe down the tray table. I wipe down the armrests, any video equipment that I'll touch.
I always clean the table, always clean my seatbelt, clean the armrest when I get on the plane. Because I know it's dirty, I know it's not clean.
Time to give some travelers a small solution, marketplace style.
We got some marketplace wipes for you to take with you.
Oh my God, thank you so much.
So since you're in the air all the time, just use a couple of those on those things you're touching and...
That's beautiful, wow.
It's like I really need those wipes.
You do need those
They're here, buddy. We got them, okay? Say thank you.
He's with you. Do you know what those are?
Killing germ wipes.
So you wipe down all those surfaces before you sit down.
Okay, I will make sure of that.
Popular blood tests, science or scam?
Lots of people are sensitive to lots of food.
You can do harm by ordering these tests and having your children remove these foods from their diet.
Blood, sweat, and tears for marketplace.
And domestic abusers, they always can figure out new advanced ways to cause harm.
High-tech home invasion.
When you go back to those nights,
Right.
what was the worst of it like? It's almost as if the house is haunted. If anybody would walk into the situation, they would think they're walking into a horror movie.